So for the first question, I'd really like to think that all trades back then were fair. And why is that? I think, especially when we're talking about fairness here, we are essentially trying to compare the values of the trades, right? And in economics, we like to think values as either monetary or utility values. Monetary values refer to the currency values, and for us, in our case, it is CAD or Canadian dollars. It is standardized, so everyone has the exact same one unit of values. Utility values, on the other hand, refer to the benefits derived from the goods or services. And unlike monetary values, utility values are relative and super dependent on the individual needs, desires, and or preferences. So, say one thing is probably going to be super valuable in terms of utility value to me, and this exact one thing could be well useless to other people. And when I think about our Agora, it was in fact a by definition a perfect free market, meaning there were no external factors that forced us to make the deal, and nor no market distortion to disturb the deal, like taxes. But except for one thing though, that our Agora was actually incentivized with trade numbers, so whoever gets the highest trade numbers gets something, right? Also, and I don't know if it was intentional, but Dr. Fo was not present during the Agora, so there were also no regulations. And the undergrowing of our Agora was in fact very wild, but as a result of that, I believe every trade was made based on the mutual agreement between two parties. Although, when we look at other trades, the utility values of the trade items, right, could vary based on our own personal preferences. But since we were doing barter trades in a free market, every transaction occurred should be fair enough between the two parties. Again, because there were no external factors that forced us to make the deal. So that my opinion of a trade was a fair trade or not is in fact irrelevant here. And it will be biased to my own preferences if I were to judge the fairness here. And at this point, I think my definition of fairness is in fact very clear. As long as the transaction occurred based on when both parties acquired what they wanted and they're happy about it, then it is fairness to me. Because I won't have any deeper understanding of both parties' preferences or their personal needs, so that obviously I don't get to have a say in judging the fairness of their transactions. As for whether or not there were front stage or backstage performances going on, my answer is yes and no. I like to think that front stage as adhering to the dominant culture, and backstage, on the other hand, is staying true to your own personal beliefs. And because dominant culture is subject to time and space, right? So that when thinking back to Agora, the dominant culture at that point of time and space is to go around and exchange information, ask about the items, and do the trades. And if that is your thing, then as long as the thoughts are exchanged transparently, there's nothing about frontstage or backstage performances going on. Which is why I believe there is no way to fully differentiate if a person's action is a frontstage or their true dispositions without knowing the motives, of course. And the same logic also applies to the backstage, I think. Because there were a few people during our Agora that were not doing what others were doing, but that doesn't necessarily mean they were in their backstage. It could be that they think not doing what everyone else was doing was cooler, and that was actually their front stage performances. So that if I were to speculate, I'm very inclined to think that there were at least one person putting on a mask just to adhere to our dominant culture, and because Agora is a public space after all, so that backstage comes only when they enter their private space after the Agora. Hence my yes part of the answer. And if I were to think about the entire process of our exchange, I tend to believe that not only human society is unequal, but the entire universe is actually unequal. People trade because they don't have everything they needed and wanted. And sometimes some entities just happen to possess or good at producing the thing they needed and wanted. Although the process of a perfect free trade is fair, but the action of trading itself is embedded in equality, meaning someone has something you don't have. That's why you go ahead and trade. And sometimes I might just happen to have the things that others might want, and that's why others come to me and trade for the things that I possess. And in Agora, I believe that is the reason behind every transactions. Because we can't derive much utilities or benefits from our own listings, but sometimes we see far greater values in others' listings. And when two parties feel the same, they trade, right? So that when I say the entire universe is unequal, it is a result of scarcities. Trading and specializing is just a coping mechanism. Every creature in this universe has a finite amount of resources, and physicists think that the two most important of all resources are time and energy, which I'm very much in line with them. Just imagine that if everyone has infinite amount of time to study and master everything, then when they also have access to infinite amounts of energy to produce anything they wanted themselves, then not only trading but also gifting will become meaningless. But in our world, we don't and we can't have infinite amount of anything. We live with scarcities and inequality, and that is precisely why we specialize and trade. And in terms of our process represented a form of free exchange or not, I think I've already answered this earlier, which is I do very much believe it is an almost perfect example of free market exchange. But I tend to believe that freedom and equality are not interconnected. I think both ideas in contemporary society are measured by outcomes. Equality means everyone will have the same outcome in trade of their own free choices. And freedom means everyone will have the control over their own choice of actions, but in trade of different outcomes as the results of different actions. Although I think theoretically, when a society has progressed to have access to resources that converge to a infinite amount, then there will be a near perfect quality to be achieved, right? So that there will be, in terms, will be an inevitable freedom, and that it will, well, become the end of most social sciences, right? But freedom itself, on the other hand, I don't think it will lead to equality. And I'm actually inclined to think that too many degrees of freedom will only bring chaos. And I'm also aware of the idea that if everyone has their freedom of choices or speech in a public sphere, the equality will be achieved through a sense of leveled and transparent communications, right? But I think the example of Agora or any trades or exchange in our world in the reality that they actually defeat this exact idea. Because if all my previous ideas stay true, then the trade itself means there is an inequality. And because there will be front stage performances, right, in trades, and so that the bottom line logic of trading literally means someone has something that others don't. And I think that's precisely why we trade.